Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker this morning, and I'm very honored to be the one who will introduce you with distinguished professor Lauren Lieberman from State University of New York at the Brockport. I think I know Lauren for more than a decade, even more, and she's my one of role professors. And I think not just for me, but for many colleagues around the world who are working in adapted physical activity area. And Lauren is not just a great academic, but she's, I think, one of the best influencers for those who want to start and to develop programs in outdoor sports, adapted outdoor sports for people with visual impairment. And she is founder of a movement which is called Campabilities. I think Lauren definitely will explain more about this in her presentation. And she's a professional in hiking, camping, kayaking, mountain biking, and she's also a great guitar player. I witnessed her playing guitar and singing in Campabilities organized in Latvia. And I don't know how she manages all the activities she accomplished every year, because every year she receives multiple awards. Like, for example, 2021, she received the Global Fulbright Scholarship to start new capabilities in such countries like Ghana, Ireland, Brazil. And also she received research award for the Institute of Movement Studies Individual with Visual Impairment. She's author of many, many books, even more research articles. And I'm very happy that Lauren is with us this morning and will share her knowledge, experience, and expertise with our Congress participants. So Lauren, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Aya. I appreciate it. And I want to thank Laura and the whole organizing committee for inviting me. So thank you. Thank you, Aya. And just wonderful to see everyone here today. I know a lot of us have overcome a lot of barriers to get here. But before I start, I just wanted to pass around a few books. One of them is called The Camp Ability Story. And I know this is one of the things Aya talked about. This is how I started Camp Abilities, and it's a sports camp for children with visual impairments. I'm going to talk a lot about universal design for learning. So this book is about universal design for learning. We can pass that around, and that's another option. And then also this is our brand new strategies for inclusion. So this focuses on physical education, but has a lot of examples of different outdoor adventure and recreation activities. So we can pass this one around too. And you all got a card. Everybody got a discount card. Human Kinetics is the publisher that I work with. They're giving everybody 20% off. So, and they have a European distributor. And so if you order it before November 30th, you can get any of these books, and I think any books, for 20% off. Okay? So I'm going to back up. So my title of the presentation is Universally Designing Your Outdoor Program, Including Everyone. And I assume that if people are here, you already include a lot of people in your program. So who am I? I'm a distinguished service professor. As I was saying, I founded Campabilities. I also co-direct an institute on movement studies for individuals with visual impairment or deaf blindness. I do a lot of my research on visual impairment and people who are deaf-blind, but I also have a whole line of research on universal design and inclusion in physical education and outdoor adventure as well. Oh, by the way, this cool picture, this was in North Carolina in the middle of a waterfall. Oh, we were hiking up this waterfall. It's a happy place, very happy place. So this is our logo on the Institute of Movement Studies for Individuals with Visual Impairment. And so what IMSV is we promote leadership. I train my undergraduate and graduate students. We promote scholarship. We do a lot of research, intervention research, qualitative research. Program development, we run sports camps and recreation camps for kids with visual impairment or people who are deafblind. I was just 3 weeks ago, I was in Iceland. We did the first ever Camp Abilities in Iceland. That was awesome. If your country doesn't have a Camp Abilities, a sports and recreation camps for kids with visual impairments, come see me. I'd love to help you start it. We don't have one in Spain yet, so I'd love to talk to anybody who'd like to start a program for kids who are blind and visually impaired, or adults who are blind and visually impaired or deafblind, because obviously they deserve to be in the mountains and be out and active too. And then the other part of our institute is education and also doing workshops and training people, so now you're all a part of the institute as well. Okay. So just a little about me. I thought about talking about the importance of outdoor adventure, but I think everybody knows that because you're here. But instead I want to share like more personal what it means to me. And so I don't know does anybody know what a 46er is? What is a 46er in the US context, maybe the New York context? Anybody? 46er. So in New York, in northern New York, this is the Adirondacks, that green part. There's 46 peaks above 4,000 feet. 46 mountains above 4,000 feet. If you hike all of them, then you're a 46er. And so that's a common thing in New York. If you hike all of them, you're called a 46er. Then we have a common language. So I can say to Aya, hey, have you done any of the 46? Oh, yeah. You know what? Did you do Blake? Blake was such a pain. It was so muddy. You know, now we have this dialogue. We have something in common. And when you're doing the 46, you have that goal. You want to finish those 46 peaks. And so this is a picture of me on after I finished my last one. And you see that mountain, it is 6 million acres. The Adirondack area is 6 million acres. I invite anybody, come hike with me in New York, and we'll go do a 46 peak. Maybe you'll get addicted to it, but it is a pretty common thing where I live is the 46 peaks in the Adirondacks. So, enough about me. Now, about this presentation, I'm going to talk about the importance of outdoor adventure, obviously, a little bit about some research, what is universal design for learning, that we're going to talk about dignity of risk, and self-advocacy, which is part of dignity of risk. I'm going to give some examples, share a few resources, and then we'll talk about our 10-10-10. Okay? Of course, outdoor recreation has been known to show an increase in enjoyment, satisfaction, physical and mental, and overall well-being for youth by giving them the opportunities to be included in activities they might not typically participate in. So we did research with our kids who are visually impaired on their experiences in outdoor adventure. And the common theme was every time I've done something in the outdoors, whether it was kayaking, whether it was hiking, mountain biking, they loved it. The problem is they don't have enough opportunities and they're often left out of especially field trips. When their class goes on a field trip, sometimes they don't take them because they think it's too dangerous or they don't know how they're going to include them. Okay? And so if everybody thought about universally designing their programs, then our kids, it wouldn't even be a thought to leave them behind. Okay? And so can I ask everyone, how many have heard of universal design? You've heard of universal design before. Has anybody ever done any research on universal design? Some research. Thanks, TA. I knew you would do it. And so the idea is that you plan ahead of time, way ahead of time before your participants come, before your program starts. You plan a range of skills and abilities. So I was in Ireland, and I was at an outdoor center. I was doing a training with some of the staff. And they said to me, but Lauren, like when the bus pulls up with the kids, we don't know who's going to come. They don't tell us what are the abilities or disabilities of the kids. And I said, aha, that's why you need to universally design. You don't know who's going to come off that bus. How are you going to meet the needs of everybody that comes off that bus if you don't plan ahead and plan for that diverse abilities? And so that's what universal design does. So there's 3 components. Is everybody ready? There's going to be a test. How many people here are students? Are extra credit right now? Extra credit for you. Okay? So the first one is representation, and that is literally just how we teach. And so in universal design, the idea is multiple means of. Multiple means, like how many different ways can you show the student or the participant how to do that activity? And so you might show a demonstration or a video, or somebody can go and do that for them and show them what it is that you want them to do. We even have things like posters. And then we have engagement down here. That's how do you motivate the person? How do you get them excited about it? Maybe you tell them a story about somebody doing a big adventure like that. So maybe you're teaching kayaking, and you talk about how T.A. Loeffler just did this. Where did you go, T.A.? Around, what was that peninsula called? Yeah. What's a better one? You're making a face. Right. So maybe you could talk about someone who's done a really exciting adventure and share that with them about what are the possibilities. If you learn how to do this, you could go around any body of water that you're interested in. And so motivating them, getting them excited. Sometimes it could be music. Sometimes it can be getting them excited about their favorite show or movie or rock star or adventurer. So getting them excited about that. And also so that they can sustain that activity and not just do it for a short period of time. And then the next part, the last part, is action and expression, where you look at how do you assess their abilities? What can they do in the way that they can do it? So you're not assessing everybody the same. And so looking at how they show you what they know. Okay? And so universal design, here it is again, just to go over. Engagement is motivation. How do you sustain their interest? Representation is their instruction. What are the different ways that you can show them how to do that activity? And then also different teaching strategies. And by the way, one of the representation ways is called whole part whole. And so it's especially for like kids who are blind that I work with, if I'm teaching kayaking and I just take the paddle and show them how to paddle, but they don't see how it all fits together in a boat, making the boat go forward, they're going to think this is the stupidest thing. What does this have to do with anything? You have to show them the whole activity before you break it down into parts. Okay? And then action and expression, the way students show you what they know, assessment. Okay? I'm trying to use universal design and showing you what universal design is, if you didn't notice. Okay, so here's another example. So here's engagement. Stimulating the students' interest and motivation. So some examples are giving them a variety of equipment. So at this outdoor center, we had 6 different kinds of stand-up paddle boards. Some of them actually had seats on them, so the person could start off sitting, and one of them actually had just on one side it had a paddle, so if the person could just hold it, they could actually paddle with that one paddle. Okay? As much equipment as possible. And then if there are games and rules, if you're playing a game or a sport, they're modified to address multiple learning domains. One of the things about UDL is it's not for that one person. So let's say this one person has cerebral palsy. I'm not saying this is for them. They have to use this equipment. Or this rule is for them. Because what participants have said over and over is that they don't want special treatment. They don't want to be singled out. They want whatever modification to also belong to everyone. So you ask our kids, we say, you can sit on the paddleboard, you can kneel on the paddleboard, so that they don't feel like we're saying it just for them. So everybody gets to have that accommodation if they need it. And then with representation, presenting information and of course content in multiple formats, as I was just saying. So audio, explaining it, giving cues, of course visual, using demonstrations, and also using demonstrations of boys and girls and people with disabilities, making sure you have a range of people that give the demonstration. Kinesthetic demonstrations and approaches specific to the needs of the child. Maybe they need physical assistance. How many of you have had to use physical assistance or support when you taught before? You had to physically assist and to help them physically. But they didn't feel awkward because you could have done that with everyone. So that's the idea, is that those multiple means of representation are done with everyone. And then action and expression, understanding there are multiple ways to teach for the students to show you their global learning objectives. So what is the end goal? What do you want them to do? And how are they going to show you that they can do that? So when assessing a class, not only are they assessed along with their peers in the program, but they're provided any adaptations that they need when they're assessed. Okay, so if you are doing, let's say you're going to be doing a distance hike or an elevation hike, they have the different supports that they need to access that trail or that park. Okay? And again, there are options are provided for everyone to complete that skill. So does that make sense, all these three components of UDL? You're going to get a good grade on the test, everyone? So the other point of this too is that we talked about this yesterday, the dignity of risk, in that if we universally design our programs, then all participants should be able to engage in the activity. How many of you have heard someone say, you know, this is a little too dangerous for you, I'm not sure you should do this skill or activity? Has anybody ever heard? Yes, so there's about half of you have heard somebody say, I don't know, really, don't think you should do this. But who are they to decide for you that you can't do that? So the dignity of risk is the principle of allowing an individual the dignity afforded by risk-taking with subsequent enhancement of personal growth and quality of life. If we take away that risk, we're not giving them that opportunity to grow and learn how to do that sport or recreation activity for their lifetime. And it's not going to be an option for them. And so regardless of age or ability, everybody has the right to self-determination and to take reasonable risks. An individual with a disability should not be prevented from opportunities to participate in activities that others deem risky, because taking away that risk devalues their human dignity. We don't want to do that. And I've seen people say that in front of their peers. What message does that send? What message does that send when everybody gets to do that and some people don't? Who can tell me? What message does it send to the peers and to the person that's being excluded? Anybody? What message does that send to them if I say you can't do it? You're out. What's that? You're out. Simply, you're out. You're not worth my time to figure out how to include you. You're not important. And we don't want to send that message. Okay? The dignity of risk is essential in important aspects of life, People with disabilities have the right to a future where they have access to physical activity opportunities. I don't know what my life would be like without being able to kayak and hike and bike. I mean, it's part of who we are. And we want people with disabilities to have access to that and know how they can access that. In order to accomplish this, individuals with disabilities must understand the risks associated with each activity equivalent to their peers and how they can navigate those risks. Everyone has the right to make the decisions and a reasonable risk. So if they know how to universally design the lesson or the activity for themselves, then they can participate whenever they want with that modification. Denying someone this autonomy restricts personal growth, self-esteem, and the quality of life. But when people with disabilities are out in the community doing physical activity, I'll give you an example. One of the campabilities, we took all the kids up to the top of this mountain. We were in Texas. I didn't know there are mountains in Texas, but there are. And the same thing happened. We were in Alaska at the Alaska campabilities, and we're at the top of the mountain. The kids have their canes, and these other kids were walking by, and they said, "Oh my God, how did you get here?" And I was looking at the kids. I'm like, "Jason, how did you get here?" And he's like, "Well, how did you get here?" He asked them, "How did you get here?" He said, "I got here the same way you did." And the kids had their canes unashamed, head up, and they changed perceptions in the community of what people with visual impairments could do because they were out there. They were doing the same thing as their peers were doing. And that's what we want to promote. So, who can tell me? Who knows who Eric Weinmeier is? Eric Weinmeier. Who can tell me? What's your name? What did he do? Who is he?
I think he climbed Mount Everest and has physical disabilities.
Yeah, he's blind. And not only did he climb Mount Everest, he climbed the highest summit in every continent. And do you think some people told him he shouldn't do it because he's blind before he started? Yeah, TA saying yeah. So he did. He had a lot of people that said he was going to risk the lives of other people if he climbed Mount Everest, because obviously he had some adaptations. He would hike with hiking poles in front of him, and someone was in front of him, and he held the poles behind them, and that's how he hiked. But they figured out how to do it. There were a lot of nuances and adaptations that he needed along the way, but he did it. And he's written books, and they've made movies about him. And he showed the world that someone who's blind can hike a mountain. So when I have kids say that they weren't allowed to go on their field trip hiking because they're blind, I said, well, you need to look up Eric Weinmeier. And there's a couple of books that he wrote. One is Touch the Top of the World, and one's called No Barriers. He also kayaked the entire 277 miles of the Colorado River, which has some rapids that are so dangerous they're not even rated because they're so dangerous. And so you have to think about that. He had the dignity of risk. He knew what the risks were, but he also knew how to make modifications. They actually had a sound system where a person would kayak in front of him and told him what to expect, which way to go, and that kind of thing. I mean, that doesn't minimize the risk, but at least he knows how to navigate that. So, dignity of risk. This was in Iceland. We were horseback riding, and some people would say, well, that's really dangerous. You shouldn't take kids who are blind horseback riding. So we took a lot more time. When the kids got there, they felt the whole horse. We taught them, we broke it down, and they felt somebody else riding the horse, and then they had a chance to ride the horse. So this is just another activity where people oftentimes will say that the kids can't do it, and I actually have places that rent horses and let you go horseback riding that will say that people with disabilities can't go there. They don't know universal design. And that's the other thing, is we need to teach people in the community about universal design so that they will welcome everybody and not say, you can't come here. Okay. Another one, this was in Ireland when I was doing my Fulbright In Ireland, they had kids with all kinds of disabilities surfing. Now, people might say surfing's inherently dangerous whether you have a disability or not. And now you're putting people with intellectual disabilities and spinal cord injuries and cerebral palsy on surfboards. They knew the risks. And we made sure we universally designed it ahead of time, and they had a great time. You can see the smiles on their faces. It's worth the time and effort and risk. And now they know what they need to do to access that sport. Okay? So, how do we universally design mountain climbing? It focuses on making the activity accessible, enjoyable for everyone, regardless of their physical abilities or experience level. So, these are just some key considerations. Most of you are probably already doing this. Maybe you'll have a takeaway, but one is access to locations. I know I heard people talking about pathways and trails. Create well-maintained, wider trails with gentle gradients to accommodate various disabilities. Sometimes it's possible. When it's possible, we need to try to do that, obviously. Transportation. Ensure accessible transportation options to climbing sites, including parking and shuttle services. Okay. And here's just some pictures of people accessing those climbing areas. And again, adaptive equipment, modified climbing gear. We have harnesses for when we do our rock climbing, and develop harnesses and prosthetics tailored for different needs, such as sit skis for skiing for individuals with limited mobility. Wheelchair accessible equipment, create adaptive climbing walls and boulder setups, and allow individuals in wheelchairs to participate. I'll talk a little bit more about, remind me about pre-teaching. And then also inclusive programs, guided tours, offer guided climbs with trained instructors who specialize in working with diverse groups. Make sure that, that instructors are trained in language, trained in adaptations, and if they need to come early, we'll talk about pre-teaching, to make sure everything's set up, to make sure there's a communication understanding between the people with disabilities and the instructors. That should happen as well. Some community support, climbing clubs, foster inclusive climbing communities that encourage participation from all individuals. So it's not enough to train the instructors. You really have to train the participants too, because you might go at a different pace. You might have two different groups, and everybody has to understand that and accept that because it's the way it is. And I know sometimes you might have people that complain because maybe you're moving at a different pace or you're going a different route. They have to be educated as well. Peer support, implement mentorship programs, pairing experienced climbers with newcomers, enhancing confidence and skills. Like at my camp this summer, we're having a mentor program where we're having mentors who are blind mentor the younger athletes, and we're going to go on a big bike ride, a mountain bike ride on the Erie Canal, and have that mentor program. I think that's really important for kids to see somebody else like them doing the same sport or activity like them. Okay? And then environmental considerations, sustainable practices, ensure that accessible adaptations don't negatively impact the environment. Obviously, eco-friendly materials and practices are important. Feedback improvement, regularly gather feedback from climbers of all abilities to continually improve the accessible experiences. We might think it looks great, but we're not experiencing that from the lens of somebody that uses that with a disability. So we have to make sure we ask the people who are using that, is this accessible? Is it working for you? Or what can we change about it? So a few examples here on the left is inclusive climbing, where the boy is wearing a harness made for people with more involved disabilities. And on the right there was our rock climbing that we did when we were in Iceland. And this is one of our participants. I mean, we went there early and she got to feel the harness. Especially if it's her first experience, it's a very different feeling. Understanding the concept of what is rock climbing. No, you're not climbing on a rock. You're using rocks to climb up a wall in this case. And the concept was so new and different that we really needed to make sure they understood the concepts of rock climbing, the harness, what are the words that we're using. How do you get down after you get to the top? That sometimes I forget to explain that, and you can't just show them, and so that can be a problem. Just some other accessible pieces of equipment, this outrigger kayaking. And so in our town, we're really lucky because we have what's called Rochester Accessible Adventures. And what they do is they educate along the whole Erie Canal, they educated every outfitter that rents kayaks. They made sure they had accessible kayaks. So I don't go to Fairport, New York and say, I want to kayak with my family, but there's nothing for me. Every single one of our outfitters has these adaptations, so every person with a disability can access kayaking. So this is something that if it's not happening in the community, we are the ones that are going to make that change. And then we also are fortunate we have a lot of accessible kayak docks. With the accessible outriggers, people can independently go kayaking. And I'm sure you have these here. We're trying to make sure every single outfitter has accessible kayaks. Okay? So more about accessible programming. Interesting, a lot of times we want it to be accessible, but they need accessible parking, but the entrance isn't accessible. So it has to be from the time they park all the way in. So not just parking, access to the facilities, the attitudes of the staff, that's extremely important. I was at a place and I just, the attitudes of the staff, we brought a whole group of people who are blind. It was in North Carolina. It was after a conference. We took everybody. It was an after conference thing. And the people were not very open-minded about the tape on, because I wanted to put tape on the paddles so that people knew where to put their hands on the paddles for the kayaks. And I had a roll of tape and I gave it to the staff and they were like, I'm not doing that. You know, so, I mean, the timing is important too. We should have done a training with the staff, but they were just like, this is the stupidest thing because they weren't used to working with people who are visually impaired. So attitudes of the staff is important. Their hours of operation, obviously, sometimes it takes longer for people with disabilities to get in and out of a boat, or maybe a little longer to access a trail. So how long are you going to be there and making sure that they're open for the times that you're going to be there. And then again, equipment availability, making sure they have a range of equipment to meet the needs of everybody that comes. So I just want to share a few resources with you. This is an inclusive recreation certification. We have a colleague, Lynn Anderson, who started this. If you go to inclusiverec.org, it's through SUNY Cortland, which is one of our State University of New York universities. And you can get certified to be an inclusive recreation specialist. There is a shorter course that's about 4 hours, and then there's a longer course. You just have to pay for the training. It's online. It's really good, and it helps you think about all accessibility. If your staff aren't trained, it might be a good intro to inclusive recreation. They did tell me that to pay right now, you can't pay with a credit card. You have to pay with something else. So, but that's just one option, inclusiverec.org. Okay. Also, some of you might have heard of Wilderness Inquiry. Wilderness Inquiry, they do inclusive trips all over the world. I just think it's awesome. They take people to faraway places, people with all kinds of disabilities. And I always thought when I retire, I'm fluent in sign language. When I retire, I'm going to be an interpreter on Wilderness Inquiry. Just go and be with out in the woods with people with disabilities. None of this is going to happen, though, without advocacy. And so I just want to delve a little bit into self-advocacy. Have any of you had experience teaching people how to advocate for themselves? Anybody? 1, 2? Because universal design should be universal. But we know it's not. And so what we want to do is make sure when we have our participants, they had a great time kayaking, or they had a great time on this hiking trail, They know what modifications they need. But how are they going to articulate that when they go somewhere else? We don't want them to always go to the same place. You want to experience different adventures. How are we going to teach them how to teach the people at the next facility? And so this is just an example. This is a book that we wrote called Infusing Self-Advocacy. And so this book is called Infusing Self-Advocacy into Health and Physical Education. This is through Jones and Bartlett Publishers. So we're going to talk about what is self-advocacy, why should we teach self-advocacy, and then how do we infuse it in outdoor adventure, and who should implement the training. Adventure is a great place to infuse self-advocacy because you're going to meet people that are excited as you are, and you're going to be saying to them, in order to do what I want to do, this is what I need. And so the Merriam-Webster dictionary says self-advocacy is the act of a process of supporting a cause or proposal, the act or process of advocating for something. Okay? And so just going to give you the 4 components of self-advocacy. I have a lot more information on this. We could just do a whole workshop just on self-advocacy. But here is, you have to know yourself. You have to know your rights, that you have the right to participate in that activity. You have to know how to communicate it, and then you also have to have leadership. I'm not just advocating for myself, because sometimes it is a pain. I'm helping all those people coming behind me, because now this person knows how to include people like me, and I'm changing the world for them. But also leadership is being able to advocate for somebody else. So, and this is through the work of David Test. This is like, I call it the Test theory. He was the one who created this concept. And so we created these 5 steps. My colleague that I work with is Ruth Childs, who is a theater professor. Imagine, you do need a lot of theater when you do self-advocacy. What is the issue? Accessibility. I want to do this activity. What do I need to resolve this issue? Who can help me resolve this issue? Who's the right person to go to? I don't want to get all worked up. I'm losing sleep, and then I'm going to go talk to a person. That's not the right person. After all that, who's the right person to talk to? Then I need to effectively communicate, what exactly do I want? I don't just want to go on this trail. I want to go on this trail as far as all my friends are going. Don't give me lip service and say, oh yeah, you can go up to that peak right there, and then you have to turn around. No, I want to go on this trail. And then reflect on the outcome. After you advocated, did you get what you wanted? If you're happy with it, great. If you didn't, what can you do next? And this is an ongoing process. How many of you, whether you're at a program or at a university, in an organization, you've had to advocate for yourself? Raise your hand. Right, and you had to try to make change for the good, but it's not always easy, right? So, and then how do you think now, how do you support self-advocacy for your participants, and how can you continue to promote it? How can you explain to them what modifications you use so that the next place they go to, they can have the same access? Sometimes kids don't even realize when you're modifying for them, and then they go to the next place and they didn't realize it until they get excluded because the people don't make that modification. So another approach could be sports camp. So our kids at Campabilities, our website is campabilities.org, they learn how to make adaptations for themselves because it's a sports camp for kids who are blind. And so when you do run programs for kids with certain abilities or disabilities, they can learn specific adaptations to some of these outdoor adventure activities themselves. Now this is a picture of our kids at this waterfall. They had to ride a tandem bike down the canal, park the bikes, hike all the way down to this waterfall, and then we took our shoes off and got to feel the water. And that was something that they wouldn't have had that experience anywhere else like that. So we want to give them these kind of experiences. Also, this says Rochester Accessible Adventures. I could go on about them. That's that organization that trains all of the outdoor adventure places in our community how to be inclusive all year round. So how do we ensure that all children or participants have choices in the sporting arena? So just a couple other, I know I'm running out of time, important ideas. So one is early movement experiences. We need to get people out when they're younger, get them exposure, and then have them learn a lot of different activities. You know, sometimes if a kid says, well, I really like to swim. Well, what else have you done? What else do you know? Do you know how to mountain bike? Do you know how to hike? Have you ever done rock climbing? Like asking them some of the other activities to see what else they might like to do. But a lot of times they say, oh, I've never done any of those things. I've only swam. That's why they pick that. So asking them what they've experienced. Determine their preferred activities, and then navigate access and advocacy. So these are my steps to reaching their athletic potential. And then also pre-teaching. I'm huge about pre-teaching, having them come to your program before it starts and learn and understand what will happen. So if, for example, you're going stand-up paddleboarding, here, these kids, they come early. They learn the equipment options. On land, they're learning the different types of paddleboards, what we call the different parts of the board. So if somebody's yelling to them to go and face the front or stand on the middle, they know what we're talking about. Okay? And we also, for this particular situation, we put bright tape on the part of the paddle that should be facing backwards so that they know how to position the paddles. So again, we talk about the activity area, equipment options, rules, strategies. How do you go forward? How do you go backwards? How do you turn? Practice that. And then give them the idea of terminology. Now, pre-teaching is an area, especially with visual impairment, that is so important. But there's only 2 research studies done in pre-teaching, and one of them is in science and the other one is in physical education. So if anybody has time to do pre-teaching research, there's a lot of people, especially kids with autism, people with visual impairments, it's really beneficial. Deaf people. Again, I talked about sports camps. Now, also on our website, campabilities.org, there is, under instructional materials, we have a whole series of videos on outdoor adventure. How do you include people with visual impairments in outdoor adventure? We have hiking, fishing, kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding, rock climbing. If we have time, I'll show you one. And then just some resources. Here's our strategies for inclusion, physical education for everyone. This is our 4th edition. It just came out. It has a whole chapter on universal design in here, on assessment. How do you use teacher aids or support aids? Okay. And then universal design for learning, again, also through human kinetics. And then in conclusion, we have to make sure that participants feel comfortable when they're doing outdoor recreation activities and included. I want to say comfortable and included. Communicate with the participants before, during, and after the activity. Get feedback and reflection. What worked? What didn't work? Be inclusive and supportive of attendees so they can be motivated and want to participate again. You don't want to turn people off to being in outdoor spaces. Okay? And so I don't think we have time for the video. So if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer your questions, but also make sure you get a chance to look at those videos. They're all about how do you teach people with visual impairments how to do outdoor adventure. Very, very broken down and specific to make sure that we can include everyone. Okay?
Yeah, please. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, please, we have maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes for questions from audience. Maybe before you think about your question, I have a question. What means a 3-10? Because that was one of topics in
10,
your...
10, 10. Okay.
Yes.
So 10, 10, 10, 10 is think about your programs that you work in. In the next 10 days, is there anything that I talked about that maybe you could implement in your program to maybe make it better? Then 10 weeks and 10 months. So it's 10, 10, 10. What immediate changes can you make? And that's what when I go to a conference, this is what I think about. What can I take from this conference, and what can I improve in my programming in the next 10 days, the next 10 weeks, and the next 10 months? So what's your takeaway, and how are you going to use this to the benefit of your program? I even think about it sometimes for yourself. What the things that you do, and how can you improve your own life and experiences.
Great, thank you. Yes, more questions?
Biking. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great question. So related to biking is I love mountain biking. I bike everywhere in my town. But how can someone with or without a disability access biking? Will they be able to bike on a typical mountain bike that you can get from a store? Or do they need some modifications to that? A lot of the kids that I work with need tandem bikes, so they get tandem bikes. Some of the people I work with need like a recumbent bike or a tricycle or hand crank bikes. And so, for example, where I live, it's pretty flat, so a lot of people do get around with hand crank bikes. Okay, does that make sense? Okay.
Yes, questions? Comments?
Stories? TA?
Yeah.
In creating accessible programs, oftentimes. In creating accessible programs, is this on? Yeah. We often get focused on, oh, we can't become accessible because we don't have the equipment. Because you just listed 7 different kinds of bikes that are expensive. But can you speak some about starting that journey with attitudinal changes, and perhaps a little bit about our MacGyvering, as we say in North America, the ability to create accessible materials at lower cost sometimes?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it is. Accessible equipment is a lot more expensive than your typical like harnesses. And so first I just want to talk about funding. Well, in the US, I don't know if Challenged Athletes Foundation, we have that. It's called Challenged Athletes Foundation. They give money to individuals. So if an individual knows they're going to do a certain sport, they apply for this grant. They usually get about $1,000 or $1,500. Now, also, Lions clubs. I'm in the Lions Club, and Lions clubs are international. They're all about accessibility for particularly people with visual impairments, but also people with disabilities. So you could go to your local Lions Club and ask them for money for this accessible equipment. And then also, obviously, fundraising and grants are some ways to get money for equipment. But then there's also times when you can look at the equipment like TA say, we call it MacGyvering. How can you take that and make that more accessible for someone with a disability? So for example, I work with children with cerebral palsy. Sometimes their feet like slip off the pedals. And so we took duct tape, put it around their feet, and now they're on the bike, and their feet don't slip off the pedals. And so sometimes it's as simple as that, but not always. And so we have to, like, together think about how are we going to make this the most accessible as we can. Do you want to give an example of something that you've MacGyvered?
I'll speak really loud so we don't have to get the mic back to me. Well, you talked about people's feet slipping off the pedals. Clipped pedals is one. Kick sleds. If any of you have been to Finland where they use the kick sled to move, they use it for transportation.
Oh, they need the microphone.
Okay, sorry for that.
It's for the translation.
For translation, we need.
Sorry, lo siento. Kick sleds from Finland, what they use to go around the towns with snow. So those where I come are about $400. I also have a hippo camp where we can go over snow with skis. Very lovely, amazing, state-of-the-art piece of equipment. It costs $7,000. So when we go out in public with the kick sled, with a little seat we've made up, people can see it and see as a first step, maybe we can acquire the kick sled. And then later, maybe we can get the grant to get the state-of-the-art piece. So we gradually move towards having the equipment that is best practice, but in the meantime, we can still get outside with our participants.
Oh, great example, TA. I just thought of another one. I have friends who are blind that we ski with, and in order to go cross-country skiing, I just tied a rope around my waist, and then she tied the rope around her waist, and we just cross-country skied and made sure that that rope was tight. It cost about $1. That's a little more than €1. Okay, so that was a pretty simple adaptation to make sure that she had an accessible opportunity to go cross-country skiing. It's not always that simple.
Okay, thank you. I think we have one question. We have time for one question if there's one question in audience.
I will be here until Saturday,
yeah.
so please, if you're interested in talking about camp abilities, I'd love to talk to you about starting one in your country. And also, if anybody wants to volunteer at our camp, I have flyers about camp abilities. It's June 28th to July 5th in Rochester, New York. All you students, you're welcome to come to our camp in Rochester. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren.